After one heck of a journey throughout 2021 that wrapped up with a hugely controversial ending, the next Formula 1 season is about to begin. With brand new regulations designed to radically transform the cars and encourage tighter racing, we're all looking forward to what's in store for this year's journey. Can Max defend his title? Will Lewis bounce back to claim an 8th championship? Or will we see a brand new warrior take the lead? As we wait for an announcement from Codemasters regarding the latest iteration in their Formula 1 game series, let's take a look at the terms used within the game and the real-life championship. All of these are applicable to the virtual and real versions, and we have timestamped everything in the description below to make things a little easier. If we have missed any terms, please leave a comment down below as we will answer any questions you may have. Starting off with terms revolving around the car, DRS stands for Drag Reduction System. This allows the driver to open the rear wing, which increases top speed and reduces downforce. It can only be used within specific sections of the circuit, which is usually a straight or a long flat-out section, such as after Radion at Spa, or just before turn 15 at Interlagos. This system can be used freely within practice or qualifying sessions and within dry conditions. When in the race, however, this is activated after the first 2 laps and can only be used on an attacking car when it's within a second of the car ahead when entering a DRS detection zone. This is commonly used as an aid to overtake, as the decrease in downforce combined with a slipstream can lead to a sizable speed advantage, allowing the attacking car to pass faster than normal. Don't know what a slipstream is? Keep watching this video. The Energy Recovery System, or ERS for short, allows the drivers to apply more power to the rear wheels from a rechargeable battery. This system uses various engine components to harvest and store energy through braking and heat. The stored energy can then be used by the driver in the form of extra power. More on the specific components later. ERS can be used at any point throughout a lap of a circuit, but the amount you can use and harvest per lap is limited, which resets after crossing the line. Within the game, there are 4 modes to choose from. 0 sets ERS to recharge the battery and doesn't allow energy to be used. 1 sets it to medium, which provides a small level of energy deployment. 2 is a hot lap mode, which is used for qualifying, and 3 is the strongest form of deployment, used in short bursts to aid overtaking and defending. All 4 modes can be used within practice sessions, whilst in qualifying, drivers can only use mode 2, and in the race, only modes 1 and 3 can be used. This system is used strategically throughout a race, as the driver will need to harvest and deploy energy to maximise lap times and to keep up with the pace. Using ERS for defensive purposes is also key, as deploying energy while the attacking driver is using DRS can help keep the car ahead. The specifics don't really need to be talked about in detail, but we'll briefly mention the main components that make up the engine in the F1 game. The internal combustion engine, known as ICE, is the heart that drives the car. This part wears down through over-revving the engine and leads to a reduction in power. Let's now cover the specific engine components related to ERS that I mentioned earlier. There are 2 components that harvest the energy, these being the motor generator unit kinetic and the motor generator unit heat, or MGUK and MGUH for short. Using ERS in the higher modes will lead to wear, and this leads to problems with energy harvesting and deployment. ES, or energy store, is the name of the component that stores the energy harvested from the MGUK and MGUH. Keeping the energy charge at a high level for too long can increase wear on this component and leads to a reduction in energy capacity. The turbocharger, also known as TC, makes use of exhaust air that powers a turbine and provides more power to the engine. The high-pitched whistling sound you can hear while driving comes from this component. Heavy mileage on the turbocharger leads to a gradual reduction in power. CE, known as Control Electronics, does what it says on the tin, controlling every electronic aspect of the car. Opening DRS, changing ERS modes, using the radio, and much more is all down to this part. Extra stress is put onto this part when straying off the track, and also while travelling on curbs due to vibrations. Extra wear on this component leads to added wear on other components within the car. Finally, the gearbox is where, predictably, gear changes take place, and teams are restricted to 3 gearboxes per car over the course of the season. Every gear change increases wear on this component, and this will eventually lead to gearbox problems, such as the driver losing a specific gear, and therefore being unable to select it. Every team is able to choose between 5 different tyre compounds, ranging in firmness and durability. The 3 dry compounds are softs, which are red, mediums, which are yellow, and hards, which are white. The softer tyres give you the most grip, leading to faster lap times, but these also degrade faster than the harder compounds. On the opposite end, the harder compounds are slower initially, but last longer than the softer compounds before degrading. During a dry race, every driver must use at least 2 different compounds to ensure a pit stop has been made, but these rules are disregarded when it rains. The other 2 compounds are set aside for wet weather, and these are intermediates, which are green, and wets, which are blue. The intermediate tyre contains small grooves that displace small amounts of water, and this is suitable for slippery conditions such as a drying track or a small rain shower. The wet tyres contain larger grooves and displace a higher amount of water than the intermediates. These tyres can cope with more standing water, but as less rubber is actually touching the road, they also provide less ultimate grip. That's why these tyres are well suited to heavy rain but nothing else. Choosing the right tyre is crucial for the race. If the driver is on a dry compound when it's raining, the track can quickly become undrivable, and this leads to spins or crashes. Just look at what happened to Lando Norris during the final 5 laps at Sochi in 2021 if you need an example. On the other end of the scale, using a wet compound on a dry circuit is equally disastrous. The deeper tread not only reduces the amount of grip, but also creates far more movement from the tread block, leading to tremendous overheating and degradation. Speaking of degradation, you may have heard of tyres falling off the cliff. No, this does not mean they are chucking them off of a precipice, this term refers to its performance. As more laps are driven on a set of tyres, the amount of rubber wears down and the grip decreases. When the degradation hits a specific point, the cliff, the tyres will suddenly lose a huge amount of grip and performance relative to the previous laps. If you were to visualise this in a graph showing tyre performance and the lap count, you would see the performance take a sudden sharp dive down, hence the term, tyres falling off the cliff. As the driver applies the brakes, the force slows the rotation of the tyre down and increases heat to the tyres and brakes in the process. If there is too much force applied to the brakes, they can stop the rotation of the tyre, while the car continues to move forwards. This causes huge wear on the tyre as the car skids under braking and wears the tyres as it scrapes along the road, hence being called a lock-up. The tyre can lose multiple layers of rubber, causing a flat edge to appear, known as a flat spot, and intense vibrations throughout the car, leading to an uncomfortable ride and loss of grip. Every corner within a circuit will need a different level of braking force, and the driver has to constantly find the edge between maximum stopping power and a lock-up to perfect braking performance. As a car runs throughout a race, the 4 tyres begin to shed layers and leads to shards of rubber being thrown out onto the circuit. With all 20 cars racing and putting tremendous loads into all of their tyres, this causes a layer of rubber shards to appear on the surface of the track that isn't on the racing line, which is where the shards are thrown to. Straying offline and into these shards causes a huge loss of grip. It's just like walking on a bunch of loose marbles, and this is why the stray rubber is given this name. As you reach the end of a lap, you'll most likely hear box 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 over the radio from Jeff.
We're boxing this lap. Give us the best in lap you can.
This term is telling the driver to come into the pits to either chuck on a fresh set of tyres or to unfortunately retire the car during a race. However, you may be thinking, but why don't they use pit pit pit? This could be down to the word box being easier to distinguish than pit while racing at around 200 miles an hour, with the word phonetically clearer and louder, but who knows. Speaking of pit stops, every team comes up with a plan to maximise their tyre performance throughout the race, also known as strategy. A common strategy you will often see involves a short stint on soft tyres, followed by a longer stint on medium or hard tyres. These differ for each circuit, so if one strategy works well at Monza, it may not work well at Suzuka, for example. It's also worth pointing out that this changes over the years depending on the nature of the tyres. 10 years ago, tyre degradation was so strong that teams would regularly make 3 or 4 pit stops in a race. You will hear the terms undercut and overcut mentioned by commentators in pretty much every race, sometimes more than others. The terms define a tactic used to overtake an opponent in front, but can also be used by the defender to maintain their track position. Let's start with the undercut. If you have 2 cars out on track with worn tyres, the car behind may try and pit first, to put them on a new set of tyres a lap or 2 earlier than the car they are chasing, in order to try and jump them in the pit cycle. As an example, let's have driver A and driver B, both 20 laps into the race with worn tyres. Driver B is 1 second behind driver A, and decides to come into the pits. They throw on fresh tyres while driver A is still on track with worn tyres. Then driver A comes into the pits on the next lap for their own set of fresh tyres. As they leave the pits, they may well find themselves overtaken by driver B, even if both pit stop lengths were exactly the same. This was all down to the 1 lap in the middle, when driver B was leaving the pits on new tyres and driver A was completing their last lap on the worn tyres. The difference in grip was significant for that 1 lap, allowing driver B to go from being a second behind to being ahead when driver A left the pits the following lap. An overcut is the same principle but in reverse. In some cases, brand new tyres may need some time to heat up, and this can cause a loss of grip and a slower time than a driver on worn tyres. This is less common than an undercut as it takes specific conditions at a specific track for the new tyres to take so long to get up to temperature. Aerodynamics mean everything when it comes to Formula 1 cars. As the car travels through this wall of air, it leaves a hole in the air behind it, and the car following therefore doesn't have a wall of air to drive through, so there's less resistance. This process is called slipstreaming, where the car behind is not subject to the same forces as the car in front, leading to a speed increase. A tow is commonly used by drivers within the same team and takes advantage of this slipstream effect. For example, Ferrari is running in a qualifying session at Monza. Carlos Sainz is a couple of seconds in front of Charles Leclerc after exiting Curva Alboreto, and therefore Carlos gives Charles a slipstream. Once Leclerc is close, Sainz moves off the racing line to allow Charles the ideal racing line going into the braking zone for the first chicane. If you are still in the slipstream heading into a corner, however, this can lead to issues. The loss of downforce while slipstreaming is perfect for the straights, but causes huge problems as soon as you need to turn, because less air resistance will give you less grip. This effect is called dirty air, as the car in front disturbs the aerodynamic capabilities for the opponent behind. We've covered this topic in full within another video that can be found in the description below. If there are any specific flags you have additional questions for, feel free to leave us a comment. A backmarker describes a car that is about to be lapped and isn't in the fight for the lead. Once a car is about to lap them, they will be shown the blue flag that signals them to slow down and let these cars past. There are different rules concerning blue flags for other series, but the backmarker must adhere to the Formula 1 rules to not face a penalty. Depending on your settings, the F1 game contains varied lengths for each session, but we'll talk about the standard Formula 1 weekend format. The weekend kicks off on the Friday with 2 practice sessions, each lasting an hour. There is then a third and final practice session on the Saturday morning. These 3 practice sessions are used by the teams to acclimatise to the circuit, try out different tyres and engine settings, and complete both qualifying and race simulations. Then it's qualifying for real, where every driver tries to set the fastest time around the track. This session is split up into 3 parts, Q1, Q2, and Q3. Starting off with Q1, all 20 cars have 18 minutes to set the fastest lap around the track. Once the time is up, the 5 slowest drivers are eliminated and start tomorrow's race from 20th to 16th. The times are then reset for Q2, with 15 drivers going at it again for 15 minutes, and the slowest 5 drivers eliminated to set the grid between 15th and 10th. Finally, Q3 lasts for 12 minutes with the remaining 10 drivers and dictates the final top 10 positions according to their fastest laps within this specific session. This all leads to Sunday's grand finale, the race. The grid lines up according to the time set in the qualifying session, and it's lights out and away we go for 300 kilometers. A new format was brought in on a part-time basis last year, known as sprint qualifying. On the weekends where sprint qualifying takes place, the schedule is as follows. Friday contains free practice 1 and a normal qualifying session. Saturday then sees a second free practice session, followed by sprint qualifying. This is essentially a short race, which sets the grid for Sunday's main race. Sprint qualifying races are only 100 kilometers in length, and the grid for this is set by Friday's regular qualifying session. The sprint format is only currently planned for 3 races this season, and we'll have to wait and see whether this session will form part of the F1 2022 game. These next few terms are specific to the real F1 Championship and occasionally pop up during a broadcast. A super license is the name of the license a driver needs to have in order to compete in Formula 1. Drivers will have to gain 40 super license points in order to obtain one, and these points are gained by finishing well in the junior formula. Each championship that is seen as a possible stepping stone into Formula 1 gives drivers super license points depending on their final championship position. The idea of this being that you have to prove you're good enough to race at the top level. For example, coming first, second or third in Formula 2 gains you 40 points. Coming first in the NASCAR Cup Series gains you 15 points, and finishing 4th in the Formula E Championship gains you 10 points. Silly season refers to the signing of drivers and the transfers from one team to another. There's usually a lot going on at once, and one move can lead to the next, almost like a ridiculous game of musical chairs. Crazy rumours send fans wild before each announcement, and things should always be taken with a pinch of salt until the teams confirm their lineups. That's why it's called silly season. For example, there were 12 driver changes between 2020 and 2021. Mental. The introduction of brand new regulations this year brought a multitude of problems to the fore, with one in particular being described as porpoising. This refers to the harsh bouncing issue drivers are facing while going down a straight, leading to the bottom of the car hitting the road and dangerous grip loss as it rebounds back up. As we head into the first race of the season, teams need to quickly find a solution before it's too late. However, it's never too late to consider subscribing to Traxion and tapping the bell icon to not miss any of our future content just like this. If you have any additional questions regarding Formula 1 and the game, then please leave a comment in the section down below, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Until next time, keep it pinned, and see you in Bahrain.